So, Jonathan, after teaching hundreds of thousands of people how to use AI, what do you think is one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're prompting AI?
One of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to prompt AI is that they overcomplicate it. They're trying to teach it like it's programming. It's not. It's a large language model. Talk to it, Aleric, just like you and I are talking today. That's the single biggest mistake people make. Now, it's followed by the second biggest mistake, which is not giving it any context whatsoever and assuming it can read your mind. So it kind of goes on both sides, but most people tend to way overthink and way overcomplicate what it means to prompt AI.
Wow. That definitely makes a lot of sense. And it's a lot easier, right? Actually speaking to it as if you're having a conversation and also making sure that you're sharing all of the different contexts. Well, I'm so excited for this episode of the Marketing Minds podcast because we have Jonathan Mast, and he is a leader in the world of AI. We're going to be diving into all things AI. He founded the company Whitebeard Strategies. He's been on the forefront of digital innovation since 1995. And over the last few years, he has been one of the foremost leaders in the world of AI and helping all kinds of people, from business owners to people diving into AI, training them how to use AI in one of the biggest AI Facebook groups right now. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, absolutely. Thanks for having me. You know, I love talking about AI stuff, so I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We met recently at an event, with all kinds of expert-based businesses. You were having an amazing panel. You were sharing all of some of the great strategies you've been using with AI. So we've got a lot to dive into in this episode. And so one of the things that I know you talk about, and I just want to jump right in, there's a lot of things we're going to cover
Let's
in this
go.
episode here, but you talk about the perfect prompting framework. And I know that's helped a lot of people. It's one of the big things that you kind of focus on. And we just kind of alluded to it at the beginning. Do you mind kind of breaking that down, how people can think about that and actually start prompting the AI to get even better results?
No, I'd love to. In fact, you know, one of the things that so many people start doing as soon as they get involved with AI, Aleric, is they dive in to start collecting prompts. It's like, oh, I need that prompt. I need that prompt. I need that prompt. I want to save that prompt. And I get it. We all love to see a great prompt and save it and think, oh, I might use that again in the future. The reality, though, it's not an efficient way to prompt AI, because if we end up with a list, whether it's one we've curated or one we've bought or maybe a combination thereof, by the time we decide that we want to do something, we go look up that prompt, we come back and we edit it to fit the way we want. We've probably spent 10 or 15 minutes that we never needed to spend. And so instead, what I encourage people to use is to use a prompt framework. You never have to save a prompt again. All you need to do is remember 4 simple steps. We start by telling the AI model, whatever AI model you're using, you're this type of expert. Number 2, here's the background information on the question I'm going to ask you. Number 3, here's the question I want to ask you. And the fourth part, if you forget everything else, the fourth part's what really matters. Ask me any clarifying questions you have. You end your prompt with that. Because if you don't, and you've forgotten information like me, I forget stuff all the time. If I've done that, AI is taught to make an assumption. We know what happens when things assume. AI then begins to give us responses that resemble the southbound end of a northbound mule. And we go, man, AI sucks. No, it doesn't. We just didn't give it good information. So tell it what type of expert, give it some context, ask it your question, and don't forget, end every prompt with ask me any clarifying questions you have.
I love it. And it's such a simple framework for people to understand. And you sharing this, I think anybody who is watching or listening, you really need to understand how powerful this framework is. I've tested this out. And compared to what I was doing before, actually starting to apply this framework, and especially that last piece that you were talking about, Jonathan, asking the clarifying questions, that is so key because you don't realize all of these assumptions that AI is making. And if you just normally use AI, it'll just start coming up with an answer. And sometimes you think, oh, okay, well, that's great. But the problem is it might have totally misunderstood what you're doing. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And so when it comes to this, if we take this a level deeper, and I know there's all kinds of things I'm excited to dive into, from what some of your favorite AI tools are, to things you've seen with different models, to some of the other elements and ways that you teach people on how to use AI. We're going to cover a lot. But just to dive a little deeper into this framework, could we use an example? Let's say,
Absolutely.
Maybe somebody's looking for help with, a business strategy or a social media strategy or something like that. How would you prompt the whatever language model you're using, following your framework, just to kind of give an illustrative example to the viewer or listener?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's say, for example, maybe you're looking to be acquired. The way every entrepreneur seems to want to get acquired, and you go through that and you're like, oh, I've never been here before. What am I supposed to do? Well, there's a lot of things we could do, but I'd start with a prompt like this. You're an expert business acquisition consultant. Simple, easy peasy. After years of building my own business and becoming an overnight success in most people's mind, I've been blessed to have the opportunity to have somebody want to buy my business. Simple. That's my context. I'm clueless about what's involved in this process. Be honest. Nobody's going to judge you. I need you to guide me through the process to make sure that I can maximize the amount of money I can sell my business for while minimizing any ongoing liabilities that I want to deal with. There's my question. How do I maximize my price, minimize liabilities? Ask me any clarifying questions you have.
That's great. That's great. And you just see how simple that is, breaking it all down and also telling the AI, if you don't really know, like, hey, I don't really know what I don't know here, and ask me clarifying questions. In your experience, because I've also experienced this too, and sometimes it seems like it has more clarifying questions. Sometimes it's just a couple of quick things. What is that kind of back and forth, experience that people should expect when they are answering these clarifying questions? And then when they do get the prompt that they're looking, or the answer, I mean to say, that they're looking for from the prompt, do you ever kind of continue to follow up to try and get exactly what you're looking for? What does that look like?
Well, first and foremost, you're absolutely right. We need to assume that prompting is not like playing the slot machine where we're just pulling a lever and we're hoping we get the right response. No, it's a conversation, just like you and I would have if we were working on a project. It's really no different. And so if I ask you the question and you give me a great response and I needed nothing else, I could be like, we're having a conversation. I'd go, Aleric, thanks so much. And I'll walk away. But the reality is, normally when we're working on a project, that first question and your answer leads to another question and another one. And we end up having what they call a conversation. And you want to do that exact same thing with the AI model that you're talking to. When it comes back, maybe it brought up something you hadn't thought of, maybe it just asked you some questions you hadn't thought of, or maybe, again, in going through it, you're like, oh, now I want to ask this follow-up. Don't start a new chat. Don't do anything else. Just continue that conversation. The best results happen, just like they do when we communicate with people, when we carry on a conversation.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And then also what you're looking for out of something too. So a more important prompt that is going to, dive in pretty in depth, that you're going to be making major business decisions. You want to make sure you have all the context versus something, that might be a little bit more simple. So I totally get that. And I think that's also valuable for people to understand. In terms of analyzing data, kind of taking a little bit of a shift here, and I do want to talk about some of your favorite AI tools for these different things in a second, but when it comes to analyzing data, that's something I've been doing more and more. And it's also valuable to use what you're doing with the perfect prompting framework. But I'm curious if there's a different way that you would structure that. Let's say somebody's looking either at business data or maybe health data, whatever it happens to be that the AI, you're wanting the AI to analyze. What would be your adaptation of the perfect prompting framework if you're adding data into the mix that you're looking for analysis?
I would just, my request, I would ask it to analyze the provided data and then answer my question. Literally everything else the same. You're the expert. Here's my background information. Please analyze the provided data, answer my question, and ask me any clarifying questions you have. Same thing.
That's super easy. And that's one of the things that I was genuinely wondering too. It's like, how do you adapt that? And it's so easy. It's just analyze this data, adding it in. And I think this is one of the reasons I was so excited, for this podcast here, and why I think it's going to be really valuable for everybody listening and watching. And we're just getting it started, is how simple you make AI. I think that's something that really stands out. Are there any other best practices when it comes to prompting, when it comes to getting the results you're looking for, before we start diving into some of your favorite models and tools?
There's a lot of them we could talk about. One of my other favorite best practices is, before you get really deep in AI, take just a moment and teach it a little bit about yourself. Now, some models like ChatGPT will remember that, other models won't. My recommendation, and this is the shortened version, Aleric, but is go out to a website like personalities.com. Take their test. It's a Myers-Briggs test. It's going to take you about 10 minutes, and it's going to give you a 4-letter acronym at the end. That's who it identifies who you are. Depending on the time of day and where I'm at, I'm either an ENTJ or an ENTP. I'm one of those weirdos. I claim too. So I literally, when I'm using ChatGPT, I go in, respond as an ENTP/ENTJ. It knows literally reams of data about what it means for me to be an ENTP, /ENTJ, and it even understands that I may switch based upon my work modes as to what personality is best fit. They're very similar, but there's some differences. And when I do that, now when I create content, when it responds to me, whatever the case is, it's like talking to an advisor that knows who you are and all of a sudden responds in an appropriate way. There's a lot more we could dig into, but that's a simple, easy hack everybody that's listening to this podcast can do in the next 10 minutes, and it will greatly improve your AI responses.
And I do want to dive into as much as possible. So we're going to be diving into that. We'll take a quick detour to talk about the LLMs that you recommend.
Yeah.
But then I do want to dive much deeper into the prompting side, and then also prompting for image generation, prompting for videos. So we've been doing a lot of experimentation with AI videos, which I know you've also been doing as well. And it's just so amazing, especially Google VO3s. We're gonna talk about
awesome, yeah.
Incredible, all of this and more. But just taking a little bit of a detour, I do want to return back to your perfect prompting principles. In terms of LLMs, I know it's a big question a lot of people have, is what tool to use. And of course, I use a lot of different tools, but people out there that are kind of looking at that, what would you say, and what tools are best for different things? What have you kind of found? And let's just start with the LLMs. And then I do want to talk about some of the, because I know you know a lot of other amazing AI tools, but if we just look at kind of the big players in the LLM side, what would you say are some of the strengths of different tools?
Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to encourage you, whatever LLM tool you have access to will allow you to jump ahead or leap ahead so far. Don't make the mistake of having to find the perfect AI model. It doesn't exist. And Aleric, you know as well as I do, things are changing so fast in AI that if it did exist today, chances are tomorrow it would be different. So pick an AI model, whatever one you have access to, and become proficient at that one first. Then you can start looking into other models. Now, given that, I would admit about 80% of my work happens in ChatGPT. I'm a huge fan of, in particular, their custom GPTs, where we can train a model on different things. And I love that. And so that's one of the reasons I use it. If I'm writing content, whether I'm writing a book, a social media post, or even a SOP, chances are I'm going to use Claude to do something like that. Claude's by a company called Anthropic, and it just is an amazing writing tool, and it's fantastic. If you're a Google shop, use Google Gemini, especially in the last few months. Google's finally got off its butt. It's created a really great AI model, by the way, that didn't exist this time last year or even 6 months ago, but they have now, and Google Gemini 2.5 or whatever version it is now that you're listening to it is really incredible. They're amazing. And if you happen to be a Microsoft shop and your office mandates that you use Copilot, I'm sorry, but it'll still let you take a massive leap ahead of where you are. So don't fall victim to the, I need the perfect AI. Those are 4 of the biggest engines out there. We can add the 5th being Grok. We can then talk about others as well. But any one of those 5 models will allow you to do things that you couldn't have dreamed of doing 6 months ago. And so start there, learn to master it, and then move on as you want. Now, what I didn't talk about that I love is Perplexity. Perplexity is an AI-based search engine, and a lot of people wonder, well, could I just use Perplexity? Because if I pay them $20 a month, I can use ChatGPT inside it, or I can use Claude or Gemini. Can I just do it? You can, but I don't recommend it. It's a different tool. When you use Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT inside of Perplexity, and by the way, the reason Perplexity is so amazing, unlike Google, which gives you 10 websites to go look at, Perplexity gives you those websites and answers your question for you. So you don't have to go searching near as much. It's much, much faster. But when you're using the other models, it's actually using it to respond to the search query that you've got. And so it's not as good at, creating an SOP, doing things like that. While I say that, last week or the week before, Perplexity just introduced Perplexity Labs. And if you haven't tried Perplexity Labs, it is worth the price of admission, $20 a month, in and of itself. Imagine being able to go in and give a goal to an AI model and have it create everything needed in order to accomplish that. And that's essentially what Labs does. Very simple example. I went in the other day, as you may have heard, one of the tools we haven't talked about, 11 Labs, which is an AI voice tool, came out with version 3. I saw it at about 3 in the afternoon. I run a big group. I need to get the information out there. I need to give them a basic guide. What's V3 about? What's it like? I went to Perplexity Labs and I said, I just read the announcement. I haven't had time to test it out yet, but I want you to scour the web and find all the reviews and all the information you can. And I want you to create a beginner's guide to using 11 Labs version 3 that's written for my Facebook group, which is primarily business owners and entrepreneurs. It wrote me a 27-page document. It included in that 12 images that it created. It put in statistics that were right. It cited over 80 different works, created graphs, created tables, put it all together, and I gave it one really rotten prompt that didn't even follow my perfect prompt format. And I ended up with a document that I was able to share that evening with my audience that truly helped them get started with a new tool that normally would have taken me 2 to 3 days to have even fit into my schedule, to find the time to review. Now, I still did a deep dive, and we're actually just wrapping that up. But that was almost a week ago, and we're now just finishing our deep dive. We had that quick one done in literally about 45.
Wow. That is
sorry,
incredible.
I went off target a little bit.
This is amazing. And we already we started diving into one of the next things I was wondering about, which is all the other tools that we can look at. But I use Perplexity actually just before this, and we know each other too, and at the event and stuff. So I didn't need it as much for this interview, but on the podcast, just a little bit of behind the scenes, Perplexity Deep Research. I love using that to figure out all the details about somebody before I have them on the podcast, so that I can, ask better questions. I can format and craft, more hard-hitting questions. And it's so interesting how AI has evolved things, because in the past you used to have you have to have a research team, to go podcast. And I didn't have that because this is a more recent podcast, but other podcasts, I know I talked to them, they'd have somebody or multiple people whose entire job it was to kind of scour and do in-depth research. Now Perplexity can do that. And I did not know about labs. So now I know what I'm doing this evening is playing around with Perplexity Labs. That's why I was so excited for this podcast too. I knew, and there's only going to be even more amazing golden nuggets coming, but I knew we were going to dive into some stuff like that. So let's actually intersperse it a little bit, because I do want to hear more about, I know 11 Labs, we kind of mentioned Google VO, but also other AI tools. I'm excited to dive deep into that. But before we get into that, we did say we dive a little deeper into the prompting. What are some of the other best practices? We have your perfect prompting framework. We have the understanding of kind of letting them know about the personality. That's very interesting. That's a new thing, that I haven't heard as much before. What are some other ways to get the better output or better prompt, or train the AI on, are?
So a couple things. First, the ways to train the AI and who you are. Quite literally, you can go into any AI model and you can tell it, I need to train you on my personality, my tone, my style. I would like you to interview me, asking me one question at a time and asking me as many follow-up questions as are necessary for you to create a comprehensive tone and style guide that I can reuse every time I need you to create content so that you reflect my tone and style. And when you say go to that, it's going to begin an interview process, one question at a time if it listens, which it may or may not. And then you're going to be able to respond, and it's going to continue asking questions. It may ask you 10, it may ask you 100, probably about 10 to 15. And then it's going to come back and give you and say, okay, Aleric, based on what you just shared with me, here's your tone and style. And by the way, you can now copy and paste this to your clipboard or save it somewhere and throw it in Notion, throw it in Evernote, whatever. And the next time you want it to create a social media post for you, write a memo on your behalf, write an email to a client. One of my favorite things to do, taking an email I don't know how to respond to, copy and pasting it in and having it respond. When you give it that tone and style, guess what? It won't sound like AI anymore. It'll now sound like you.
That's exactly. And I know, just diving into all of that, and that's something that, I've been building out with a lot of like sample styles, but it also makes a lot of sense just to ask and have the AI interview you back and forth. And would you turn that into a custom GPT or like a Claude project as well? And then maybe, and I've done, some of this, but what are some of the best practices if somebody's watching or viewing this, but maybe they haven't set up either a custom GPT or a Claude project? And I'm sure, because I've heard people mention this, like they think it's very complicated. What would you say to that person that maybe hasn't set up one of these projects about how it's not as complicated as they may think?
Well, first, it is certainly not. And you're right. It's the next best step, because instead of now saving this information, and maybe I also want to have it do the same thing for my company. I want it to say, okay, now do that for my brand. I want you to now ask me questions to understand about the products and services we sell. And you may end up with 3 or 4, we'll call them snippets, could be bits of text, could be pages of text that now reflect you and your company and your brand and who you serve. And you don't want to have to copy and paste those in every time you want to do something. So if you go to ChatGPT, it's called a custom GPT, and Claude, it's called a project, and Google Gemini, it's called a gem. And you literally create a new one and you upload that data and say, here's my tone and style. I want to name this one Jonathan's Writing Companion, or whatever we decide to name it. It's what I have done personally, by the way. My staff has access to my writing companion. It's my tone, my style, Whitebeard Strategies brand, all that's in there. When my customer service team needs to respond to an email, especially maybe one where we've got to say everything just right, they don't write it from scratch. They have this GPT, Claude Project or Gem, write it for them. It's already been trained on all the things it needs to know. And they don't now have to remember, oh, geez, I got to copy this in and now I don't have to worry about that. No, they literally just go click on a link, it loads it up, and it's now pre-trained on all that information. And it literally can save you hours a week, or your team hours a week in going back and forth.
Absolutely. And are there any other best practices before we kind of move on and talk about some of these other really amazing AI tools? Any other best practices, either in the prompting or in the custom GPT or project builds that you'd recommend?
There's a lot, but the one I'd like to probably leave with before we bore everybody to death with all the best practices is don't hesitate to tell it what format you want it to respond in as well. If you're asking it, for example, the other day, I used a deep research tool from ChatGPT to look up a bunch of leads. And I said I wanted it in a table, and I defined, I want these columns, these headings, and I want you to fill the table out. And guess what? When it was done, that's exactly what I got back. I was able to copy and paste that directly into a Google Sheet or an Excel spreadsheet. Super easy. If you want it as a PDF, specify that. If you want it in Markdown format, specify that. If you want an outline, ask it for an outline. Keep those things in mind in that format and just ask it for what you're looking for. Even if it gives it to you in one format, don't hesitate to go back and go, hey, I forgot. I really wanted that in a table. Could you do that instead? And sure enough, a few seconds later, you'll have that same data back in a table the way you wanted it.
I love it. I love it. I know you have so many of these that we could talk all day, which is amazing. And I know you're going to share some resources a little bit later on, but that can kind of dive deeper. And your group is fantastic for this as well. But next, I want to kind of dive into some of these different AI tools that you recommend, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into the images and videos. I actually have some questions specifically around that, but feel free to jump into those. But what are some of the different AI tools that you'd recommend for doing different things? I mean, there's so many AI tools these days. If you had to say, like, what are some of your top AI tools that you would recommend people use for different purposes?
Good. Well, we went over the basic LLM. So you've got your ChatGPT, your Claude, your Gemini, your Grok, things like that. They're fantastic. Let's take a look at images. We want to create images. There's multiple ways to do that. You can do that in Gemini. You can do that in ChatGPT. I happen to be a huge fan of some image-specific AI tools. I like to use Midjourney. You can also use a very popular one called Ideogram and another very popular one called Flux. They're all excellent. They have their strengths and their weaknesses. Find one and learn how to use it, because now I can create Midjourney images in seconds because I know what I'm doing. It takes me a little longer if I switch platforms because it's like switching cars. Like, I happen to drive a Honda. If you happen to drive a Toyota or a Chevy and we switch cars, we'll both be able to figure out how to do it. It's like when you go to Hertz and rent a car. But how many times have you got in a rental car and you're like, okay, where are the lights? Because everything's just in slightly different spots. So find one you like. I'm a huge fan of Midjourney. Love it. It is a paid only program, but if you're in business, one of the reasons I think it's okay and I love it, by paying them, I actually get a license from them. That means that I can now very comfortably, at least for me, use those images for commercial purposes. And after all, in business, I want to do that. So I'm happy to pay them a little bit of money in order to get that commercial license and not have to wonder, do I really have that license or not? Another tool that you've probably all seen around is the various note takers that show up on various meetings that we go on to. If you've ever done a Zoom meeting in the last 3 months, you've probably seen 1 or 100 note takers jump in. And there are so many of them. I'm not going to recommend a specific one, but it's a technology that I really encourage business leaders to look at because it allows us to be focused on the meeting and not be focused on taking notes. And let's face it, most of us as entrepreneurs, we don't excel at taking notes anyway. There are some exceptions. My wife's being one of them. She's got an operational mind and she's great at it. But I now can focus on the meeting. It's going to create a recording of that. It's going to have a transcript of it. Now I can go back, or my team can go back and find out, what did Jonathan promise he was going to do? What did Aleric say he was going to do? What are the next steps we need to follow up on? And now guess what? I don't forget about things. Well, I take it back. I still forget, but now I have a way to remind me. So I love AI note takers. I think they're amazing. We talked a little bit about video. Before I talk about video, I want to talk about voice. So there are tools out there that will allow you to recreate your voice. And before people go, why would I want to do that? Well, how about if you want to create a podcast and maybe you don't have time to hop on and record it? You now could literally create a podcast that you could give using your voice, using tools like 11 Labs and things like that, that are really amazing. And sometimes when it comes to getting helpful content out, we still want to make sure our content's helpful, but using AI can help us get things done that maybe a year or two ago, we just didn't have time to do. Then video, and video is absolutely exploding. I mean, I can't even begin to describe how it is exploding. If you haven't, you're not behind if you haven't started, by the way, because what we have for AI video today is so incredibly different than what we had even in January. Everything is brand new. Google is the dominant force as we record that. Now, that literally could change tonight if somebody has a new announcement, but as we record this, Google's VEO3 or VEO3, depending on how you want to pronounce it, is definitely seen as the new watermark. It came out just a couple weeks ago. It is incredible. And you can use both text to video, where you give it text and it creates video, image to video, where you upload an image and it does that, or a combination when you upload an image and text and it takes that image and it will animate or turn that in. And we're not just talking cartoon animations here. I mean, literally, I'm seeing people recreate scenes from movies that you can even pick the movie it's from, not because it's identical, but because they've managed to just give it enough information to put all that together. I think video is one of the areas that we're going to see more changes in the next year than we do in any other area. And then the last tool that I haven't talked about on there, are probably some that I'm missing, but the last tool is what we call agentic AI. And agentic AI differs from normal AI in that if I'm using ChatGPT and I want it to do 6 things, I probably need to give it 6 prompts in most cases in order to get the best work out of it. And if I don't, I probably still need to at least tell it what those 6 steps are. Agentic AI takes it a step further, and we talked a little bit about it with Perplexity Labs. It's kind of like an intro to agentic AI, where you can give it an outcome, an objective that you want to achieve, and you can say go, and it will figure out and use logic to say, well, in order to do this, I need to do the following 4 things. And then it will begin executing on those things for you, even to the point now that these tools are getting access, if we want, to our computers to be able to interact with files, applications, and things like that. We could go on and have a whole podcast just about security. We won't do that. But the way things are changing, there's so many aspects to AI. It's why so many people, I think, Aleric, feel overwhelmed, because they're like, I don't know where to go. Remember, you don't have to know it all. It's changing so rapidly that if you don't catch it for a month or two, if you don't need to create video, for example, I wouldn't spend a moment worrying about it right now. If you don't need to create images as part of your job, unless you want to have fun, don't worry about it. Just focus on the parts, take whatever drudgery is in your job. And let's face it, we all have a little bit of that here and there, hopefully less and less as we mature, but a little bit of it. Find those drudgery items and have AI do the heavy lifting. Have it help you through that. It's that report that you've got to go through every Friday or every month that just wants you pull your hair out, because so many things you'd rather do on a Friday afternoon than go through a report. Upload it to Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT and ask it to go through it and give you the summary. It will probably do it better, and Lord knows it'll do it a whole lot faster.
I love it. And I think, like, first of all, that was amazing. And you just kept going with all of these amazing recommendations, which I think is incredible. And just the way that you break it down and make it simple, I think that's, one of the reasons so many people turn to you for all their, AI advice. And I think that what you just said at the end is really valuable to think about, because even and I'm sure yourself as well, like, it can be overwhelming how fast all of this is evolving. What are the things that, if you're watching this or listening to this, what are the things that you need to do in your role, in your business, job, whatever it happens to be? And then how can AI make that better? And then using your perfect prompting, framework, and then kind of going down down from there. Are there any recommendations you'd give? And I want to talk more about agentic AI in a second, but with images and videos, any recommendations? I know you also talked about Midjourney and Google VO3. Of course, there's a lot of different tools, but is there any difference in how you would set up a, kind of a prompting framework for those? Would it be similar? Or how do you usually recommend that? I also know things like Midjourney might have different different kind of ways
Hmm.
that you let it know the styles, things like that. But any recommendations, maybe overall, on how to get the image or video output you're looking for?
Yeah, so what I've done is I've actually created custom GPTs that are trained on the specific pieces of software. So when it comes to writing an image prompt, you can be very simple and get a pretty good image. But oftentimes it's the old 80-20 rule. You can get 80% of the way there with 20% of the effort. If you want to go that extra 20%, it does require 80% of the effort. And I don't want to do that. So I let ChatGPT help me out with that. It's trained a model on, in my case, Midjourney. It knows it well. I can now literally just give it a concept that I want and a style that I want, maybe photorealistic, maybe a Pixar 3D cartoon, maybe a watercolor painting, whatever. And it will give me, because I've told it to, 5 different prompts. Let me go, Jonathan, why 5 different prompts? Well, first of all, if I run one prompt 5 times, I'm going to get different images every time. Consistency is not perfect. It's actually randomness is built into AI image generators. If I get 5 prompts, I use Midjourney, it's going to give me 20 images. I'm going to like 2 or 3 of those really well. I'm going to not like a bunch of them. It's okay. It's not a problem. I'll use the ones that I like, not filling up a landfill, and we're going to go on and move forward. We've got another tool that I didn't mention. One of my favorite AI video tools that I use for a lot of my faceless stuff when I want to promote different things or I want to give maybe an explainer video. I actually love a tool called Syllabi. I think you probably, like I do, Austin, and Austin's an amazing guy. He's got an amazing team. I've got a custom GPT that writes Syllabi videos, and it basically creates the script so that I can go in and I can copy and paste it into that tool, and it will now give me exactly what I want. Because let's face it, I don't want to take the time to think through all of that. I do the exact same thing with video. We've got different models. We've got a generic one that writes video in general, and I've got one trained for the new VO3 that, again, has been trained on its idiosyncrasies and what they're, because I don't always think in the same terms that a video producer might think. But when I talk to VO3 or Flow, which is Google's actually producer, in a video production knowledge-based tone, all of a sudden I get much, much better stuff. So I can now speak in English, which is what Jonathan tries to do, and it will turn it into video production speak that gets the maximum value out of that particular tool. Same for Midjourney images, same for Syllabi, you name it.
Yeah, which is great, which is that 2-step process. And definitely I've been doing a lot more on the video side just because of, video marketing and YouTube advertising and the YouTube side of things. And that's what I found, this exact same thing that you're sharing with Google VO3. There's a lot of amazing things you can get just by putting a prompt in there. However, if you want more specific results, like you're saying, using one of these other tools, Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, to develop the prompt with Google VO3 in mind, and then feed that into Google VO3, you can get a lot more specific, like you said, the film production speak. So I've seen a similar thing, and I'm glad that it's aligned with that. And when it comes to agentic AI, that's something that admittedly I have not been diving into quite as much, but I know that there's so much opportunity. So I'm excited to check out Perplexity Labs, play around with a few of these different tools. I know there's also ChatGPT Operator. What do you recommend with, and then of course also Manus, I think as well, is also very popular.
Manus is one we should mention, absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you recommend? Maybe break down some of these different tools for people that might not be aware of them. What do you recommend? And then what's the best way to get the outcome that you're looking for? And what do you think AI can do the best with these types of agentic? Because it can't necessarily do everything yet, but I'm curious what you've seen it perform the best at in terms of tasks.
So there are a number of agentic tools out there. There's two that I use regularly. One is Manus. I believe it's manus.im. It's free to get started. There is a paid plan like most everything else. Remember, by the way, quick segue, every AI company is trying to sell you their AI model like drug dealers try to sell you drugs. They give you a taste of it. They get you hooked, and then they tell you it's going to cost you money. It's just the nature of the way it works. Don't get mad about it. It's part of the game. Go on from there. But Manus is great. The other one is Perplexity Labs. It's not a full agentic AI, but it's so easy to use, and it gets you, again, 80% of the way there, and it's so simple. Manus you can actually use for free. They're going to try to sell you an upgrade. I have a Manus account that I've been using on a test basis at least once a day for the last 30 days, and I have put exactly 0 pennies, $0, zero anything into it for payments, and I use it every single day. Now, you can do that same thing. And that really goes to probably your best question. How do you learn these? How do you figure out what to do? You play. You literally go in and you go, you know what? I've never used Manus before. I wonder how it would do this. And you go ask it a question. And then you go, oh, it did that. If you do that every day, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Claude, whether it's Gemini, whether it's Grok, whether it's Manus, whether it's Perplexity or Perplexity Labs, and just once a day, you would try something out and see what happened, even if you don't think it can do it, and see what response you get back. You'll start conditioning yourself that you're going to begin taking on what many talk about as an AI first mentality. And that's it. Instead of trying to think, oh, I could have used ChatGPT to do that, I could have used AI to do that, you're going to now be going, I can use AI to do that. And then guess what? I can either get more done, or I can drink more coffee, or I can get home on time, or whatever is important to you, you can do. Because as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a business leader, if you can't figure out in 30 days how to cut at least an hour out of your work schedule every day, you're not trying. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. You're not trying. AI is so powerful, it'll probably do 10 times more than that. And yes, I literally mean you should be able to take a normal 8-hour workday and probably turn that into a 3 to 4-hour workday. That means you're going to get more productive. It means you're going to get more stuff done on your task list that you've been ignoring. You're going to actually get to try things that you've been meaning to try that are really important but are not urgent in life. You're still going to work 8 hours a day, maybe a little bit more, but you're going to get so much more done, and you're going to buy yourself flexibility so that, Aleric, just like you and I met in Dallas, we can go to that conference and not freak out about the fact that we spent 2.5 days out of the office, because we were still able to get enough done, and we were able to get a lot done before and a lot after, because AI was able to help us do a lot of that heavy lifting.
I love it. Exactly. It just superpowers you, and it gives you that ability to have more flexibility to, go and do the things you want to do, or things that are going to move your business forward or allow you to learn and grow. Well, the AI, is able to take off, especially a lot of these repetitive tasks, or or just even be an extension, right? Like a paintbrush that
Absolutely.
you can use to do what you're looking for. So I love that way of looking at it. Now, I know we're going to have some more golden nuggets towards the end of the episode here in just a few minutes, and actually, I've got a segue into this next part, right? So actually, in a second, we'll have you share kind of
Sure.
How people can learn more, and especially your group. So that's kind of the easy answer for this, because you've got such an amazing Facebook group and community, and also other resources. But overall, and this can kind of segue into that, there's so much changing with AI. How do you stay up to date with AI? I know a big way is your group, and that's actually something that you share. But if you could segue in, like, what do you do to find? And then also, of course, you distill all of this for your group and your community. But how do you actually stay on top of all these things? And then I think that's a great segue into what you do.
Well, first, I want to say I don't stay on top of all of it. I miss things, and that's part of life, and it's not a big deal. Even though I need to be able to help guide others and add value, you know what? If I'm not the first guy that writes about the new version of whatever, it's not a problem. Like you, we have a number of peers, Aleric, that we share that are involved in the AI space. I follow them. I pay attention to what they're posting. I share, and I get ideas from them. The other thing that I do that probably brings me more than anything else is I use a very old technology called an RSS feed. Stands for Real Simple Syndication. And you can go out and you can add into that 1 or 50, 100, 1,000 websites. And I put in keywords, and it literally looks for things like ChatGPT and Manus and artificial intelligence and other, I've got a big long list. And then what happens is at the end of my day, either on my computer or my phone, takes me about 5 minutes, I literally pull up the headlines for the day that it's pulled from all of these feeds. And I say it's old fashioned because RSS feeds literally existed 15 or 20 years ago. So it's an old technology. It doesn't involve any AI at all. But then when I have it, now I can very quickly go down and discern, well, these are the things I'm most interested in. It's kind of like watching that ticking news banner on the bottom of the TV, except that you don't have to wait for stuff to come across. You can go through it as fast as your eyes can go. Then I use AI to research those things. So when VO3 comes out from Google, I see my feed's got all kinds of articles about Google's new video tool. I guess I better learn a little bit more about this. What do? I hop over to Perplexity and I have it write for me a quick synopsis. Tell me about the new Google VO3 and what's involved, and is there anything else I should be aware of? And it then, in about 10 seconds, comes back and gives me an executive summary. If I'm interested, I can do a deeper dive. If I'm not interested, I move on to the next one. Not a big deal. More often than not, I'm going to take that executive summary. I'm going to take a snapshot of it. I may or may not remember all of it. And then when I hear a question about it or something comes up in the future, I'm at least not starting at square zero. I'm starting at square 1 or 2. And that's enough often to be able to let me move into a conversation and help guide somebody on what makes sense. The reality is I'm fortunate enough just to kind of get the stuff. You mentioned earlier, a lot of people say I simplify it. I try to do that because I'm ADD. I don't have time for all the theory. I don't have time for all the details. It's amazing, but it'll cause me to go into meltdown mode and overwhelm. And so as a result, I literally just grab the stuff that seems relevant and I share it. And when it's valuable, people tell me. When it's not, they tell me too. And you quickly kind of get a pretty good ear. And it's like anybody else. After doing this for 2 years, I generally know pretty well what people are going to be interested in my organization and my group and what they're not. And we just share from there. But the real answer, RSS feeds, a very old and simple technology.
And then, the old and simple, it's the interesting, it's like the old and simple technology combined with then the AI
with
research.
AI, exactly.
And it's that duality that's so interesting and combining all of these things together. And I also have to say, like, the framework that you shared right at the beginning, it's, worth repeating, right? Telling the AI, you're the expert or whatever expert, then giving background on your question, asking the question, then, having it saying, hey, ask me any clarifying questions you have. That one prompt, understanding that is just such a game changer. And it's the way that you break all of that down. And so it's a perfect segue. How can people join your group? What are ways that they can learn more about all the things that you do with AI? We'll, of course, include all the links you mentioned down below.
I appreciate it.
What are the best next steps?
Two things. Either remember my name, it's Jonathan Mast. You can go to jonathanmast.com and you'll find all that information. I've got tons of free stuff out there, a few paid things as well. Or if you don't, just remember I'm the guy with the white beard. If you're watching this on video, can you look up white beard AI, do a Google search, at least as of yesterday, day before, the top 5, 6 are all me. Go ahead. My company is White Beard Strategies. And again, all the links are on both websites, including links to my free Facebook group. It's 100% free, no obligation, no nothing. Just start listening, start learning, and get involved. You will literally 30 days from now, you'll look back and go, man, I don't know how I used to get all this done without AI.
I love it. And it's an amazing group. There's so much value and content, and also, that you put up like great videos on YouTube as well. And so we're going to be linking to all of that down in the description below, whether you are watching this on YouTube or listening to it as a podcast. And just a quick thing I'll share as well is make sure, even if you're watching this on YouTube, we really appreciate 5-star ratings on the podcast platforms. That's how we're able to grow faster. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever it happens to be, and rate it 5 stars. There was so much value in this episode. But as you know, we always end with additional value. So I want to have an open-ended, any additional things you think is going to be valuable in the prompting side of things, or any other golden nuggets that we didn't get to touch on. And then I've got one final question for you about the future of AI and where you see it going, which we'll get to in just one second. But anything else that you want to share that you don't think we covered that maybe is like a golden nugget or extra piece of value for all the viewers and listeners?
Let me share 2 hacks, as I love to call them. A hack's not a bad thing, but a good thing. So the first deals with AI. I don't care one lick about AI detection, I'll be honest with you, because I think if content is helpful, nobody cares who wrote it. But if you're worried about it, or if you just read it and you go, man, it sounds like AI, there's a very simple response. We talk about carrying on a conversation. If you ever write something, you go, oh, that sounds too much like AI. Simply follow up with humanize this. That's it. Those 2 words, and it will rewrite the context in a way that sounds much more conversational and much better. The other thing, I'm going to give you a similar tip. AI tends to sometimes go down a rabbit hole and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't need 72 pages of information about this. I was hoping for a couple paragraphs. Rewrite using Hemingway rules. Ernest Hemingway was known for his style of keeping everything simple. And if you just say, use Hemingway rules, rewrite using Hemingway rules, that's it. It'll take whatever expose it gave you and now turn it into something bite-sized and manageable and easy to understand. So if you remember those 2, humanize and Hemingway rules. First of all, most people will never know you're using AI. And second of all, your AI content that you create will be so much more palatable to your users because it won't sound nearly like AI anymore.
Wow. Those are some great tips right here as we wrap up this episode. The final question I have is just looking at where the future of AI is going. And this is where everything else is kind of the more specific. Okay, here are the strategies, here are the tactics. But this is something I'm genuinely curious about because you have been so deep into the world of AI. And I know it's a very open-ended question and we could have an entire podcast episode on this. But in whatever time, in the few minutes we have remaining, where do you see AI going, and where do you think we should be looking? I know it's a very big question, but however you feel compelled to answer that, I'm curious what you see as the future of AI.
Well, first of all, AI is not going away. It's here and it's going to grow in ways that we can't even imagine right now. And I could give you a lot of examples, but let me give you one that actually doesn't relate to business at all, but it relates to education. We all probably either know or were that student that went through school and realized that not every lesson applied to us because they had to teach to the 32 kids in the classroom, and we were one of them. And we weren't exactly the same as everybody else. Imagine a day, and we could literally do this today if education would get behind it. They're not, but maybe they will. Imagine that a teacher could have a lesson plan. The teacher could be teaching us algebra. But because I'm interested in motorcycles, AI would literally take that lesson in real time and teach me algebra as somebody who loves motorcycles. And my wife, who happens to love embroidery, assuming she did when she was in school, would teach her algebra through the context of embroidery. Just think about it for a moment, and the ability to bring education and learning to the level that the user would learn the best, and to do that like that. The technology literally exists to do it today, maybe that fast, but literally we could do that today if education as an institution would get on board. And just imagine how those young skulls full of mush would learn and blossom if we actually taught them in a way that they were interested in.
Wow. That is an amazing example. And just thinking about the possibilities, especially in the world of education, and then you just apply that to everything else. It's going to be an amazing shift, and we could even do that today. That's not even just the future of.
No, literally this afternoon we could be doing that for students. Yeah.
Wow, where it's going to go from here. So, well, thank you so much, Jonathan. This has been fantastic. You have so much amazing insights. I know we only scratched the surface. That's why if you're watching this, definitely go and join Jonathan's group on Facebook. Check out his content, Facebook, YouTube, all the different things. We'll put all the links down below. And I know he's got incredible courses and other resources as well. So we'll link all that in the description. And thank you so much again for coming on the podcast, Jonathan.
Thank you, Aleric. I appreciate being here and love sharing.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, we'll see everybody on the next episode of the Marketing Minds podcast.